Boker Tov and Shavua Tov. I'm back for our Parsha reading, and I have two cameras set up today, so I might be a little confused because I'm testing something new out. So bear with me. Before our Parsha reading, I wanted to start with something I found massively inspirational. I've been reading this biography of Rebbetzin Kanievsky, and I'm like halfway through it, and I started reading more of it over Shabbat, and this is actually something that I had folded a page on first time I was reading it a while back. And I want to share this with you because it's about Torah study and I found it just so inspirational. So aside from learning about Rebbetzin Kanievsky, a lot of the stories in here are about Rav Chaim Kanievsky, who was a big Torah giant, if you haven't heard of him. So the bar is high, of course, reading about Rabbi Kanievsky, but he's still human. So I thought it was really just incredible to hear a story about the human potential for Torah learning, so we can reach really high and then aspire to get even just a little bit higher than our current state. So this is about his daily learning. So this says, Rav Chaim learns 8 dapim folio pages of the Talmud Bavli every morning, as well as any accompanying Talmud Yerushalmi. His daily Seder Halimud is 2 parakim of Tanakh, 8 dapim Talmud Bavli, 4 dapim Talmud Yerushalmi, 3 parakim of Rambam, and generally 5 dapim of Shulchan Aruch. This learning is called by Rav Chaim his chovot, obligatory learning, literally debts, which, little side note, I love that term, and I think it's just such a beautiful way to look at Torah learning, because ultimately we're not doing it solely for ourselves, we're doing it for our creator. So it's just a really lovely way to frame it. It takes him about 3.5 hours every day to learn his chavot. Rav Chaim began completing Shas with Tosafos. I always get jarred between the S and the T, so I kind of go back and forth. Began completing Shas with Tosafot every year when he was 16 years old. That year, he completed Shas a total of 4 times in a year, which is crazy. Wow. He added Rambam and Shulchan Aruch to his daily chovot at age 20. The first 2 years were very difficult, but by the third year, learning his chovot became much easier. Now, this is a part that was particularly impressive, which is why I earmarked this page. Rav Chaim learns his chavot from 3 to 5 a.m. and continues from 9 to 11 a.m., depending on how many brisos he attends on a particular morning as Sandek. Um, Aside from that, I'm going to skip to another section. So, Rav Chaim doesn't allow himself to be disturbed when learning the Chavot. The Gemara in Shabbos 31a states that one of the 6 questions one is asked after departing this world is, did you designate time for Torah? The time set aside for learning the Chavot was his designated time, and he preferred not to be interrupted. Wow. So another little side note, there's another section in here that mentions how Rebbetzin Kanievsky would wake up at 2:30 a.m. before her husband or before he was learning so that she could prepare a cup of tea for him, which just wow, like amazing. So that's just a really inspiring example. And I want to share that with you also because if you haven't ever heard of these sort of these questions that you're asked when you go to heaven, after you die, one of the questions is whether or not you had a fixed time for Torah study. So, if you don't yet participate in that kind of activity, if you're not doing Torah study on a regulated schedule, it's a really great thing to do. So, whether or not you're just maybe listening to this once a week or doing Parsha study every day, like one Aliyah a day, even is a nice way to break it up. I highly recommend trying to get in a habit of doing, Torah study at a fixed time, even if it's like 5 minutes a day or 5 minutes a week, like whatever you can manage, just to start having a fixed time really goes a long way. So I was just so inspired by that, and it's just incredible. So I think, when I read that, it's like I think I can manage what I'm doing compared to that. And it's just yeah, just an incredible example. So anyway, moving on to our Torah study. Again, I'm reading from the Gutnick Addiction Chumash, which is a Chabad commentary, which is very lovely because if you're following along with your own Chumash, the translations are a little bit different. And a little more natural, I think. I don't know. I really like it. So if you notice some deviations from a more traditional text, it won't be wildly different, but it's a little bit of the commentary infused into this translation. So we're now on Parshat Vayeishev, and it's getting very interesting because we get to learn more about Yosef. This is really, and I love this. I love these stories of Yosef because it always like brings out that holiday feeling. We're in Kislev and it feels like Hanukkah. So, yeah, I just love this combination. Kislev is a month of dreams. According to Sefer Yetzirah, according to the Kabbalah, there's a strong connection between dreams and this month of Kislev. So it's nice to learn about these stories of Yosef. Parshat Vayeishev. Yaakov settled in the land which his father inhabited, the land of Canaan. These are the episodes of Yaakov's descendants until they were finally settled. Yosef was 17 years old. For many years previously, he would pasture the sheep with his brothers. He would do boyish things like curling his hair and touching up his eyes to look attractive, and he spent his time with Bilhah's sons and Zilpah's sons, the sons of his father's wives, whom Leah's sons had treated disrespectfully. Yosef used to bring reports to their father of all Leah's sons' behavior, which he thought was evil. Israel loved Yosef more than all his sons because he was a son born to him in old age, so he made him a robe of fine wool. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him, and they couldn't speak with him nicely. Yosef had a dream and told his brothers about it, and they hated him even more. This is what he said to them. Please listen to this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the middle of the field, when look, my sheaf stood upright, and it kept standing too. And then look, your sheaves gathered round and threw themselves down in front of my sheaf. His brothers said to him, Does this mean that you want to reign constantly over us or rule us all the time? And they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his evil reports to their father. Yosef had yet another dream, and he told his brothers about it. He said, Here, I have dreamed another dream. Just look, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars threw themselves down before me. He then told it to his father in the presence of his brothers. His father rebuked him in order to calm the brothers down. He said to Yosef, What is this dream that you have dreamed? How could I, your mother, and your brothers come and throw ourselves down to you on the ground when your mother has already passed away? But his brothers still envied him. His father, however, believed in the dream and kept waiting for the event to occur. His brothers went to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. Israel said to Yosef, Aren't your brothers pasturing in Shechem? Come, I'll send you to join them. I'm ready, Yosef said to him, even though he knew his brothers hated him. Israel said to him, Go now and see how your brothers are doing and how the sheep are doing, and bring me back news. So Israel sent him off from the Hebron valley, and he came to Shechem. The angel Gabriel, in the guise of a man, found him, and look, he was lost in the fields. The man questioned him, saying, What do you want? Yosef said, I'm looking for my brothers. Please tell me, where are they pasturing? The man said, They've left here. They're not acting like your brothers anymore, for I heard them saying, Let's go to Dotan. We'll find a legal pretext to kill our brother. So Yosef went after his brothers, and he found them in Dotan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to each other, Look, that dreamer is coming. So now come, and we'll kill him. Then we'll cast him into one of the pits, and we'll say, A wild beast devoured him. But God said, We are going to see what indeed will become of his dreams. When Reuben heard their plan, he saved Joseph from their hands. He said, Let's not give him a lethal blow. Don't shed blood, Reuben said to them. Throw him into this pit that's in the desert, but don't lay a hand upon him. He said this only in order to save Joseph from their hands, and then he planned to rescue him and return him to his father. Then, when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped Joseph of his tunic and the fine woolen robe which he had on. They took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it, but there were snakes and scorpions in it. They sat down to eat a meal. They glanced round and saw, look, a caravan of Arabs was coming from Gilad. Their camels were laden with spice mixtures, balsam, and birthwort. They were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Yehudah said to his brothers, What profit will we gain if we kill our brother and hide his bloody death? Come, let's sell him to the Arabs, and let our hands not act against him, for he is our brother, our flesh. His brothers listened to him. Meanwhile, another caravan of Midianite men, merchants, passed by. The brothers pulled Yosef and lifted him up from the pit. They sold Yosef to the Arabs for 20 silver pieces, and the Arabs sold him to the Midianites. They brought Yosef to Egypt. Reuven had been tending to his father. He returned to the pit, and look, Yosef wasn't in the pit. He tore his garments. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy's not there. Where can I go to escape my father's anguish?" They took Yosef's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe into the blood. They sent the fine woolen coat with messengers who brought it to their father. They said, "We have found this. Please, could you identify if this is your son's coat or not?" He recognized it and said, "It's my son's coat. A wild beast has devoured him. Yosef has been ripped apart again and again." Yaakov tore his garments and tied sackcloth around his waist. He mourned many days for his son. All his sons and all his daughters tried to console him, but he was unable to be consoled. He said, "I will go down to my grave while I'm still mourning for my son, for I'll never be consoled." Yaakov's father Yitzhak wept for him. The Midianites sold Yosef to Egypt, to Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, chief of the butchers. It was at that time that Yehuda's level of respect from his brothers went down, since they blamed him for not averting the entire incident with Yosef. So he turned away from his brothers and went into partnership with an Adulamite man named Hira. There Yehuda saw the daughter of a businessman named Shua, and he married her and came to her. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him Ir. She conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She bore another son yet again, and she named him Shailah. Yehuda was in Keziv when she gave birth to him. Yehuda took a wife named Tamar for Ir, his firstborn. Ir, Yehuda's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of God, and God made him die. So Yehuda said to Onan, "Come to your brother's wife and enter into levirate marriage, Yibum, with her, and raise up children in your brother's name." Onan knew that the children would not be named after him, so whenever he came to his brother's wife, he would waste on the ground, so as not to establish children in his brother's name. What he did was evil in the eyes of God, and he made him die too. Yehuda said to his daughter-in-law, Tamar, "Stay as a widow in your father's house until my son Shilah grows up." Whenever she asked about Shilah, he pushed her off, for he said to himself, "Maybe he'll die too like his brothers." So Tamar went, and she stayed in her father's house. Many days passed, and Yehuda's wife, Shua's daughter, died. After Yehuda was consoled, he went up to Timnah, both he and his Adullamite friend, to supervise his sheep shearers. Someone reported to Tamar, saying, "Look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep." She took off her widow's clothes, covered her head with a scarf, and covered her face. She sat down at the crossroads, which is on the way to Timnah, in order to offer herself to Yehuda. For she saw that Shilah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife, and she desired to have children from Yehuda. When Yehuda saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she was sitting by the crossroads, and he did not recognize her because she had covered her face. He turned off the road on which she was traveling to the road where she was. He said, "Get ready, please. Let me come to you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you give me if you come to me?" He said, "I will send a young goat from the herd." "Only if you give me some collateral until you send it," she said. "What collateral should I give you?" he said. She said, "Your signet ring, your cloak, and the staff that's in your hand." He gave them to her, and he came to her. She conceived from him men of similar might and righteousness as Yehuda. She got up and went off. She removed her scarf and put on her widow's clothing. Yehuda sent the young goat through his Adullamite friend to take the collateral from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. So he asked the people of her locality, saying, "Where is the harlot who was at the crossroads on the way?" They said, "There was no harlot here." He returned to Yehuda, and he said, "I have not found her, and the people of the place also said no harlot was here." Yehuda said, "Let her keep them for herself, otherwise we'll be put to shame if everyone finds out. And I've made every effort to pay her. For look, I sent this young goat, but you did not find her." Then, after nearly 3 months, someone reported to Yehuda, saying, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar has acted as a harlot, and look, she is pregnant from harlotry." Yehuda said, "Take her out and let her be burned." She was taken out to be burned. She sent a message to her father-in-law saying, "I'm pregnant from the man to whom these belong." She said, "Please identify whose signet ring, cloak, and staff are these." Yehuda recognized them. He said, "She's right in what she says. She became pregnant from me, justifiably, because I did not give her to my son Shilah." But he didn't continue to be intimate with her anymore. Alternatively, in the commentary, he did continue. Then, when she was given birth, look, there were twins in her womb. What happened was, when she was giving birth, one baby stretched out his hand. The midwife took a crimson thread and tied it on his hand, saying, "This one came out first." Then, after the baby brought his hand back inside, look, his brother emerged. She said, "With such strength you have forced yourself. Paratza alecha paretz." So he, Yehuda, named him Peretz. Afterwards, his brother emerged, the one who had the crimson thread on his hand, and he named him Zarach because of the shining appearance, Zerichat of the crimson. Yosef had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, Pharaoh's officer, chief of the butchers, a native Egyptian, purchased him from the Arabs who had brought him down there. God was with Yosef, and he became a successful person while he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the name of God was always on his lips, and that whatever he put his hand to, God made successful. Yosef found favor in his master's eyes, and he attended to him personally. Potiphar appointed him over his house, and he gave him everything he had into Yosef's hand. What happened was that from the time that he appointed Yosef over his house and over everything he had, God blessed the house of the Egyptian because of Yosef. God's blessing was found in everything he had, in the house and in the field. He left everything he had in Joseph's hand, and he didn't care to know about anything of his, except the crumpet that he ate. Since Joseph was in control, he pampered himself, so Joseph had handsome features and a beautiful complexion. God said, "You are pampering yourself while your father mourns. I will incite the Potiphar's wife against you." Then, after these words of God, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph, and she said, "Sleep with me." But he refused. He said to his master's wife, "Look, my master doesn't care to know about any of my affairs in the house, and he has given everything that's his into my hand. In this house, there's no one greater than me, and he has not withheld anything from me except you, since you're his wife. So how could I do this extremely wicked act and sin against God?" When she would speak to Joseph day in and day out, he would not listen to her, even to lie in the same bed as her, or to be with her. Then, when a certain religious holiday arrived, Joseph came to the house to do his business, and none of the members of the house were there in the house, since they had all gone to the temple of idolatry. She grabbed him by his clothes, saying, "Sleep with me." Joseph dashed off and went outside, leaving his clothes in her hand. Then, when she saw that he had left his clothes in her hand and had dashed outside, she called the members of her house and spoke to them, saying, "See, my husband brought us a Hebrew man to deprave us. He came to me to lie with me, but I called loudly. And so when he heard that I raised my voice and screamed, he left his clothes with me and dashed off outside." She left his clothes beside her until Joseph's master came home. Then she told him the same thing, saying, "The Hebrew slave that you brought to us came to me and to deprave me. And then when I raised my voice and screamed, he left his clothes with me and dashed off outside." Then, when Joseph's master heard his wife's report, which he told him, saying, "Your slave did things like this to me," he became furious. Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were imprisoned. While he was in the prison, God was with Joseph, and he granted him a favorable image and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison's warden. So the prison's warden delivered all the captives that were in the prison into Joseph's hand, and everything that was done there was done through his command. The prison's warden did not see fault in anything that was in Joseph's hand, because God was with him. God made whatever he did successful. Then, after these words of Potiphar's wife, who badmouthed Joseph throughout Egypt, the attention was taken away from Joseph when the king of Egypt's butler and baker committed an offense against their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh became furious at his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker, and he placed them into the custody of the chief butcher's house in the prison where Joseph was held. The chief butcher assigned Joseph to be with them, and he attended to them. They were in custody for many days, a whole year. Both of them, the king of Egypt's butler and baker, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Each person had his dream on the same night as the other, and each person dreamed his own destiny. Joseph came to them in the morning. He saw them, and look, they were depressed. So he asked these officers of Pharaoh, who were with him in custody in his master's house, saying, "Why do your faces look so down today?" They said to him, "We've had a dream, but there is no one to interpret it." Joseph said to them, "Don't dream interpretations come from God? Please tell me your dreams." The chief butler told his dream to Joseph. He said to him, "In my dream, look, a vine was before me. On the vine were three tendrils. It seemed to be blossoming, and its buds came out. Then its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup. I placed the cup on Pharaoh's palm." Joseph said to him, "This is its interpretation. The three tendrils are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will count his officers to serve him at a meal, and he will count your head and restore you to your position. Then you will place Pharaoh's cup into his hand, just like when you were his butler in the first instance. If you would then remember me alongside you, would things go well for you, please do me a favor and mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. For I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and I haven't done anything wrong here either, for them to have put me into this prison." The chief baker saw that he had interpreted well, so he said to Joseph, In my dream, I too was there, and look, there were three wicker baskets in my hand. In the upper basket was a selection of all of Pharaoh's foods made by a baker, and the birds were eating them from the basket on top of my head. Joseph replied and said, This is its interpretation. The three baskets are 3 days. In another 3 days, Pharaoh will remove your head from you and hang you on a gallows, and the birds will eat your flesh off of you. And so it happened that on the third day, it was Pharaoh's birthday. Pharaoh made a banquet for all his servants, and he counted the chief butler and the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief butler to his position as butler, and the butler placed a cup on Pharaoh's palm. And, just as Joseph had predicted, he hanged the chief baker. But that day, the chief butler did not remember Joseph, and he forgot him later on too. Wow, I just really like that Parsha. It's really interesting. So I want to thank you again for joining me. If you haven't subscribed, I actually have a playlist now for all my Parsha readings, which Bezrat Hashem I'll continue on. So I hope you guys join me next week, and I hope that you have a really lovely, beautiful, harmonious, healthy, exciting, and fruitful week. Shabbat tov ve'litot.